Hi guys, this is Amanda Johnson, and I am going to be doing my project on trauma-informed parenting of children in foster care. So I'm going to start by giving you some information about why I chose this project, if I can get it to work. All right, so my problem that I identified was that children placed in foster care are disproportionately affected by trauma, therefore making healing and parenting out of the home more difficult. Trauma-informed resources and trainings are inadequate or unavailable to caretakers, causing hardships, disrupted placements, dissatisfied children and foster parents, or disconnected parenting techniques when addressing the children's trauma. Foster parents right now aren't equipped to handle children who have faced extensive trauma, or I should say most foster parents are not equipped to handle children who have faced extensive trauma. Children placed in their homes need additional supports and resources, and we're lacking training and trauma-informed parenting skills in order to parent the children that need to be in our home based on their past experiences and why they're with us. So my personal connection is that I think you guys may know this by now, that my husband and I have been foster parents through the Division of Family Services in Delaware for 2 years now. We are parents to an almost 2-year-old that we adopted from foster care. My husband works in law enforcement with sex offenders, and I work as a teacher in special education separate setting. We often have encounters with Child Protective Services and those involved in the system, biological parents, foster parents, children, caseworkers, therapists, all of that. And as a parent, teacher, and foster parent, trauma-informed parenting approaches are important to me to address the needs and experiences of the kiddos in my home and my classroom. So here's some just basic statistics from Delaware just to understand why this is so important in our state. Delaware is the second smallest state, so our population is not nearly as high as Missouri's or anywhere that you guys have been stated that you've been from. So in Delaware in 2017, 1,190 children were served in foster care. 451 children entered foster care, 403 children exited foster care, 281 children were awaiting adoption, 130 children's parental rights were terminated, and 108 children were adopted. And in terms of ACEs in Delaware, most of our scores fall above the national average, and with Delaware scores equaling the national average right here. So nearly 1 in 4 Delaware children have experienced 2 or more ACEs, which is important to the next slide. So our governor, John Carney, just signed an executive order in February of 2017 making Delaware a trauma-informed state. This order directs that state agencies provide services for children, adolescents, and adults to include trauma-informed best practices, which includes language, therapy. It addresses some TBRI, which we'll get into. And then he put this quote in his press release, which I thought was really important, especially because of what I'm proposing as my solution. It says, "We have children and families in Delaware who are affected by trauma in their lives, and we need to do everything we can to support them. Addressing these issues as a community will help Delaware become a stronger and healthier state. The Family Services Cabinet Council will remain vigilant about this issue and work with many partners across the state to create trauma-responsive communities." So when I was trying to come up with my identified problem, I looked at an empirical article titled "Qualitative Research on Individual Experiences with Trauma." It looked at 43 different foster youth and addressed the gap between youth-reported traumas before, during, and after foster care placements. Recordings were taken, testimonies were drawn, and then we wanted to know what youth experienced the most trauma in. So we found that extensive trauma occurred in all 3 settings, before, during, and after foster care placements. So this is important because the article states, and I would agree, that most of the trauma reported by youth who had left the foster care system seemed to target insufficient resources and supports. Children are placed in our homes, especially in Delaware, from personal experience, and from friends and family of ours that does foster care as well, that we don't have resources to help. Our caseworkers do the absolute best that they can, but our state in general is lacking resources. So with the Trauma-Informed Initiative and some additional training, which is going to be my solution, we can address these needs, and we can address the needs of these kids that need us and are placed with us because they should be, and because we should be able to help them. So my solution is that we increase availability and access to trauma-informed training, mental health resources, and parenting education for foster parents, which will then lead to increased parenting satisfaction and commitment to children in care. This knowledge, training, and implementation of trauma-informed care, especially TBRI, can lead to an increase in the children's self-efficacy, safety, happiness, and stability. So part of my solution is that when we give foster parents more resources and more access to the resources that they need, that they're going to be more committed to the kids because the kids are being served the way that they need to be served. When a child is disrupted from a placement, it is a heartbreaking thing for both the foster parents and for the child. And every disrupted placement or every move in foster care is stated to set the child back by 4 years. So 4 years is a lot of lost time. So when I was looking at this solution, I looked at 3 different articles. One addressed the commitment of foster and adoptive parents when provided with behavioral health needs and trauma-informed resources and services. Study was part of a 5-year federally funded project to include evidence-based trauma-informed practices in child welfare and mental health systems. When we looked at it, and you read the whole report, trauma-informed services and trainings, specifically in mental health, when they were readily made available to foster parents and their children, parenting stress decreased while satisfaction and commitment to their children showed improvement. So not only did that help the parents in general, but it also helped the children because they were more stable in their placement. And they were also receiving services for things that they needed to receive services for. My second part of my research was, it was called Evaluation of the Effects of Receiving Trauma-Informed Practices on Domestic Violence Shelter Residents. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of empirical articles based on children. Most of the stuff that looks at the effects of foster care are based on adults and looking backwards at their experiences within the foster care system. So I looked at this article because I wanted to know about how adults viewed the foster care system when it came to abuse and the trauma-informed practices that they may have experienced while addressing that abuse. So the findings, the methods, they looked at 57 shelter residents from 4 different programs throughout Ohio. They were all surveyed before exiting their trauma-informed domestic violence care program. And it showed that using a trauma-informed approach with abuse victims that addressed both physical and psychological safety concerns and included additional trauma services was associated with improvement in self-efficacy and empowerment. That's part of our job as foster parents too, is to learn and to teach these kids that they are not their past and that they do have some power and they have the right way to show their power, the positive direction. So my last article was my most important, and it was by Karen Purvis, who we did our TBRI unit on. So it was a decrease in behavioral problems and trauma symptoms among at-risk adopted children following trauma-informed parent training intervention. So there were also additional authors as well. So the method was looking at the different responses of children and the trauma symptoms that were shown on a survey when the participants in the current study were provided with informed consent, an online pretest, and an online post-test following a TBRI intervention. It all decreased. And I'll show you on the next page what I mean. But TBRI was found to decrease behavioral problems and trauma symptoms among extremely vulnerable children. Intervention allowed parents to become trained, and it allowed them to address trauma and their children with research-backed and trust-building interventions, allowing for a more stable relationship and dedication to the child's care. So Karen Purvis, her main background and her main methodology of this was rebuilding trust and building connections, because the research shows that when this happens and when TBRI is completed and parents are given their research-based practices that are trauma-informed and given additional resources to help their children, as well as the children getting some TBRI counseling and different avenues as well. It shows a decrease in behavioral problems, a decrease in trauma symptoms that show an increase in positive attachments between the foster parent or adoptive parent and the foster child or adopted child. and a decrease in stress hormones. So it actually changes the entire body. And as a foster parent, I have been connected with A Connected Child by Karen Purvis. It's a book that I would highly suggest if you're interested in reading it. The other thing that I wanted to mention, and I don't know whether this pops up on your screen or not, so I'm sorry if it does, but the article stated that over 240,000 children have been adopted into the United States from other countries since 1999, the majority of whom were institutionalized before adoption and at risk for multiple traumas, including maltreatment and deprivation. In addition, 50,000 children were adopted within the United States after child welfare agency involvement every year. Effective trauma-informed interventions are necessary to support the large number of adoptive families caring for children whose histories of early adversity put them at risk for a range of developmental deficits. That was the most important part to me out of that article, just because it addresses exactly my solution. We need more resources and we need more help to help the kids that are placed with us. So here's my importance, and I just kind of talked about it a little bit, but one of the things that Karen Purvis says in her video, in her book, on her website, is that when you connect to the heart of a child, everything is possible, which is true. We've seen kids turn completely around when they know that they can trust you, and they know that you're going to provide them with what they need, and they know that you connect with them. So TBRI and providing foster parents with additional resources and solutions and trauma-informed best practices is what we need to address the problem of the discontentment and the disrupted placements and the disconnection, and not being able to provide our kids with the resources that they need to address the traumas that they faced. So these are my resources and my references. Thanks. Looking forward to seeing all of yours. Bye.